They say some choices echo, bouncing off the walls of the life you thought you knew, especially the ones you carve in secret. Looking out at the manicured lawns of the inn, stretching toward the Hudson River, I still felt the sting of those choices. The life I'd bartered for stolen moments, for a thrill that turned to ash. This place, once a sanctuary, now felt like it held every whispered word, every hidden glance. I was 62 that summer, or so I thought. A woman who'd lived, built, achieved. Arthur and I, decades side by side, had poured ourselves into this inn, the Willow Creek, turning it into something solid, something to leave behind. The endless stream of weekenders, the wedding parties spilling onto the terrace, the scent of apple cider donuts in the fall, it was our legacy. But somewhere in the hum of it all, the life we built became a cage, each day a little quieter than the last. Then Liam arrived with Chloe. Young love, I thought, with that detached curiosity of someone who's seen the bloom fade. Chloe, Arthur's granddaughter, vibrant and headstrong. Liam, her boyfriend, easy charm, quick smile, seemed to fit right in, but there was something about him, a spark, a way of seeing the inn, the potential in the old stone walls, the sprawling gardens, as if he saw it with fresh eyes. Eyes that mirrored a hunger I thought I'd buried. It started innocently, a glass of wine on the porch as the sun dipped behind the trees, casual walks through the gardens talking about renovations, about his dreams of restoring old places. But those talks deepened, stretched, became something more, a silent language spoken in lingering glances. Before I knew it, lines blurred, then vanished. We slipped into a world that was as dangerous as it was intoxicating. Even now, staring at the river, I can't pin down what pulled me in. His youth? The confidence that radiated from him like heat, or just the desperate need to feel something other than the quiet ache of my days. Whatever it was, that summer left marks, scars etched into the very fabric of this place. Hidden in the antique furniture, the shadowed corners of the parlor, the scent of old wood and secrets. Will Chloe ever understand? Will she see the cracks that were already there, hairline fractures in the facade, or will she just remember me as Grandma Eleanor? The constant, the oak rooted in the grounds of the Willow Creek. But secrets, like water, find their way to the surface. And this inn, with its long memory, holds the truth. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the Hudson in shades of fire, I feel the weight of that summer, a whisper on the wind, a reminder of what we bury and what refuses to stay down. The Willow Creek Inn nestled in the folds of the Hudson Valley Hills, the late summer sun casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. It was a view I'd known for decades, yet it never lost its hold, its quiet beauty. Every stone, every ancient tree, felt like a part of me, rooted deep in the soil of this place Arthur and I had built. Arthur, always the driving force, a Wall Street titan who'd traded skyscrapers for sprawling acres. He'd approach the inn with the same relentless energy, throwing himself into renovations, into the endless grind of running a business, finding satisfaction in spreadsheets and staff meetings, in the steady rhythm of bookings and banquets. But somewhere along the way, his passion for the Willow Creek had consumed him, leaving a void, a silence that stretched between us like the empty hallways at dawn. I'd taken my place beside him, managing the decor, the guest relations, the endless stream of details that kept the inn humming. I became the gracious face, the hostess who smiled and poured wine for weekenders, who charmed brides-to-be with promises of perfect weddings. I loved the Willow Creek, but as the years spun by, my life narrowed, became a series of tasks, a routine that left me feeling like one of the antique chairs in the lobby, polished and admired, but ultimately still lifeless. Then that summer, just as the leaves began to hint at turning, Chloe called. Could she and her new boyfriend spend a few weeks at the inn? She was studying art history in the city, a passion she pursued with a fierce independence that echoed her mother, Arthur's late daughter. Chloe and I had always been close, though life, distance, had thinned the threads between us. She was vibrant, focused, her future a bright, burning thing. I missed her, was proud of her. She felt like a breath of fresh air, a reminder of the life and passion that seemed to have leached from my own. When Chloe arrived with Liam, I greeted them on the porch, the familiar creak of the old wood underfoot as I opened the door. Chloe wrapped her arms around me, her enthusiasm filling the space, a warmth I hadn't felt in months. "Grandma Eleanor, it's so good to see you," she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. I smiled, pulling back to look at her. "You too, Chloe, it's been too long." She laughed, brushing her hair back. "This is Liam," she said, turning to the young man beside her. "He's thinking about getting into hospitality, and I told him Willow Creek was the best place to learn." Liam extended a hand, his gaze steady, direct. He was tall, lean, with an easy confidence, his hand warm in mine. There was a spark in his eyes, a quick intelligence and appreciation as he glanced over my shoulder at the inn, taking it all in. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Sterling," he said, his voice soft but resonant. "This place is incredible." "Please, Eleanor," I replied, smiling. "We're family, practically." His smile widened, and for a moment I was caught off guard by his presence. Young, yes, but with a quiet charm that was both refreshing and unsettling. I brushed the thought aside, reminding myself he was Chloe's Liam, here to learn about the inn, the business. But even as I told myself this, I felt a strange current in the air, a tension that hummed beneath the surface, like the low thrum of the river after a storm. As the days unfurled, Liam and Chloe settled into the rhythm of Willow Creek. Chloe spent her mornings sketching in the gardens, wandering the grounds with her camera, capturing the light as it shifted across the lawns, the ancient trees. She'd always had an artist's eye, a talent that seemed to bloom here, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the Hudson Valley. Liam, on the other hand, was eager to learn, shadowing Arthur as he moved through the inn, listening intently as Arthur explained the intricacies of running the business, the endless dance of staff, bookings, and balance sheets. I'd watch them from the kitchen window, a pang of something I couldn't name settling in my chest as I saw Liam's admiration for Arthur, the way he seemed captivated by the details, the precision that my husband took such pride in. Arthur, of course, thrived on the attention. He'd always craved respect, validation, the recognition of being an expert. And yet, watching them, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, a connection, an energy I hadn't felt with Arthur in years. In the evenings, we'd gather on the porch, sharing a bottle of wine as the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky in hues of gold and violet. Chloe would talk about her art, her dreams of opening a gallery in the city, while Liam listened, his gaze drifting occasionally to the inn, to the sprawling estate that seemed to hold a quiet allure for him. One evening, as Arthur excused himself to take a business call, Liam turned to me, his expression thoughtful. "How did you and Mr. Sterling build this place?" he asked, his voice soft, his gaze steady. I hesitated, surprised by the question, by the genuine curiosity in his eyes. "Years," I replied, glancing out at the inn. "We started small, just a few rooms, and slowly grew it into what you see now." He nodded, contemplative. "It must have taken a lot of dedication, a lot of love." There was something in his tone, a hint of admiration mixed with a curiosity that felt almost personal. I felt a warmth rise in my chest, a flicker of the early days with Arthur, the shared dreams before they'd faded into routine, into silence. "Yes," I said softly, more to myself than to him. "A lot of love." In the days that followed, Liam and I found ourselves crossing paths more often. He'd linger in the kitchen as I prepared breakfast, asking questions about the inn's history, about the renovations, his gaze lingering a second too long as I explained the details. His curiosity was infectious, and I found myself drawn into conversations that felt less like lectures and more like shared moments, a quiet connection building with each passing day. One afternoon, as I showed him the wine cellar, explaining the aging process, he stood close, his attention focused intently on me. The air was cool, damp, thick with the scent of oak and aging wine, the dim light wrapping around us like a secret. "You have a gift for this, Eleanor," he said, his voice low, his words carrying a weight that made my heart skip a beat. I looked at him, caught off guard by the intensity in his gaze. There was something there, something that felt both forbidden and exhilarating, a spark I hadn't felt in years. I told myself it was innocent, a simple compliment, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more beneath the surface, a tension that lingered between us like an unspoken promise. That evening, as I lay in bed beside Arthur, his quiet breathing filling the room, I found myself replaying the conversation, the way Liam's gaze had lingered, the warmth in his voice as he spoke my name. It was a feeling I hadn't felt in years, a sense of possibility, of something unknown waiting just beyond the edges of the life I had built. I tried to brush it aside, to tell myself it was foolish, that whatever I thought I'd seen in Liam's eyes was nothing more than a trick of the light, a fleeting moment. But as the days turned into weeks, that feeling grew. a quiet thrill that made every glance, every accidental touch feel charged with an energy I could neither deny nor ignore. And so, as the summer deepened, I found myself caught in a web of desire and fear, a longing that both excited and terrified me, a reminder that beneath the quiet life I had lived, there was still a part of me that wanted something more, something real, something that could no longer be hidden among the shadows of Willow Creek. The first time Liam's hand brushed mine, it was an accident, or at least that's what I told myself as I felt the warmth of his touch linger long after he'd pulled his hand away. We'd been in the library, going over old blueprints of the inn, discussing potential renovations, the way the building had evolved over time. It was something I'd explained countless times before, but with him, it felt new, charged with a quiet intensity that made the air between us feel thick, electric. I should have stepped back, should have let the moment pass, but instead I found myself leaning into it, savoring the thrill that came with his closeness, the way his presence filled the quiet spaces in my mind. It was respectful, never overt, and yet there was a tension in every shared glance, a subtle invitation in every word. It was a connection we both felt but never acknowledged, a line we danced along without ever fully crossing. Until one evening, when the line between what was innocent and what was forbidden finally dissolved. Arthur had been called away to the city for an emergency board meeting, his absence leaving a strange quiet over the inn. Chloe was out with friends, and for the first time in weeks, Liam and I found ourselves alone. It was dusk, the inn bathed in the soft glow of twilight, the colors muted and warm, as if the world itself had slowed to a gentle hush. We sat on the porch, sharing a glass of wine, the silence between us comfortable, unforced. The air was cool, the scent of roses from the garden mingling with the rich aroma of the wine. For a while, we simply sat in the stillness, letting the quiet speak for us. But as the light faded, I felt a shift, a sense of something unspoken waiting in the shadows, a tension that had been building for weeks finally rising to the surface. Liam set his glass down, his gaze steady as he looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Eleanor," he said softly, his voice barely more than a whisper, as though he were afraid to break the stillness around us. I looked at him, feeling my heart race, a mixture of fear and excitement coursing through me. "Yes?" There was a pause, a silence that felt heavier than words, and then, without thinking, I reached for his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath mine, the quiet thrill of a touch I had only imagined. It was a simple gesture, a fleeting connection, but in that moment, it felt like crossing a threshold. A step into a world where the rules no longer applied. His hand tightened around mine, his gaze never wavering, and before I knew it, we were leaning toward each other, the space between us shrinking until there was nothing left but the quiet certainty of what we both wanted. From that night on, our relationship took on a new intensity, a hidden thread woven into the fabric of our days, a secret that lingered in every glance, every stolen touch. We were careful, cautious, moving through the inn with the practiced ease of people who had something to hide, a dance that became both thrilling and terrifying with each passing day. There was a freedom in our secrecy, a sense of liberation that made every moment feel precious, forbidden. Willow Creek became our world, a place where time seemed to pause, where we could exist outside the constraints of reality, if only for a while. We'd steal moments in the library, the dim light casting long shadows, a place where we could lose ourselves in each other without fear of discovery. But as much as I wanted to let myself fall into the comfort of his arms, there was a part of me that resisted, a quiet voice that reminded me of the life I had built, the trust I was risking. I'd lie awake at night, the weight of my choices pressing down on me, filling the silence with a guilt that grew harder to ignore. And yet, even as I told myself we needed to stop, that I needed to pull back, I knew that I couldn't. He had awakened something in me, a part of myself I had buried long ago, a desire that refused to be silenced. Keeping our relationship hidden became a delicate game, a balancing act that required every ounce of composure I could muster. Chloe remained blissfully unaware, her days filled with art projects and outings with friends. Arthur, as always, was preoccupied with the inn, his mind occupied by numbers and schedules, by the practicalities of a life that left little room for emotion or spontaneity. But there were moments when I felt his gaze linger, a shadow of suspicion flickering in his eyes, as though he sensed a change in me that he couldn't quite place. He never asked, never confronted me directly, but his silence spoke volumes, a quiet reminder that our lives were built on a foundation that could crumble at any moment. In those moments, I would feel a pang of guilt, a reminder of the life I was risking, the trust I had betrayed. But then Liam would find me, his presence a quiet reassurance, a reminder of the connection we had built, and all my doubts would fade, replaced by the thrill of his touch, the warmth of his smile, the sense of possibility that he brought into my life. We became skilled at hiding, slipping away when no one was watching, finding places where we could exist, if only for a moment, outside the boundaries of our lives. It was exhilarating, this game of secrecy, the thrill of knowing that we were the only ones who shared this world. A place where nothing mattered but the quiet intensity of our connection. But as the days turned into weeks, I felt the weight of our secret grow heavier, a quiet tension that settled over me like a storm waiting to break. I knew that our time was limited, that our world could not remain hidden forever, but I was too deep, too ensnared by the life we had created to pull back. The turning point came one afternoon as Liam and I walked through the gardens, the sun casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. He reached for my hand, his fingers lacing through mine, a simple gesture that felt both comforting and dangerous, a reminder of the life we had built in the spaces between our real lives. "I wish we didn't have to hide," he murmured, his voice filled with a quiet longing, a sadness that mirrored my own. I looked away, feeling a pang of guilt settle over me, a reminder of the life I was risking, the trust I was betraying. "We don't have a choice, Liam," I said softly, my voice barely more than a whisper, as though I were afraid to speak the words aloud. He tightened his grip on my hand, his gaze steady. "Maybe we do. Maybe we can make a choice." His words lingered in the air, a quiet invitation that made my heart race, a reminder that our connection was both real and fragile, a thread that could unravel at any moment. But even as I felt the thrill of his words, the possibility of a life beyond Willow Creek, I knew that we were bound by the choices we had already made, choices that could never be undone. The thrill of secrecy came with its own weight, a tension that pressed down on me each day, growing heavier with each stolen moment. As Liam and I continued our hidden meetings, I could sense the fragility of our world, the thin veneer of normalcy that could crack at any moment. Each time we parted, I felt a mixture of excitement and dread, a quiet fear that lingered like a shadow, a reminder of the consequences that waited just beyond the edges of our carefully maintained facade. It wasn't long before Chloe began to notice the subtle shifts, the changes I couldn't quite hide. She'd always been perceptive, quick to pick up on nuances, and I could feel her gaze lingering on me, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes that unsettled me. It was as though she sensed the tension between Liam and me, sensed that there was something unspoken in the air, something I couldn't bring myself to explain. I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, tried to keep up the appearance of the grandmother she had always known, the steady presence she trusted. But as the days passed, the weight of my choice became harder to ignore, harder to hide, and I knew that our world was beginning to unravel, one quiet suspicion at a time. One afternoon, as I was in the kitchen preparing lunch, Chloe appeared in the doorway, her expression thoughtful, her gaze steady. She leaned against the doorframe, watching me with an intensity that made my heart race, a silent curiosity that felt both innocent and probing. "You've seemed different lately, Grandma Eleanor," she said, her tone light but edged with a hint of something I couldn't quite place. "Is everything okay?" I felt a flicker of panic, a sudden urge to look away, to escape her gaze, but I forced myself to smile, hoping it would be enough to ease her suspicions. "Of course, Chloe," I replied, my voice steady, though my heart raced. "Just a little more tired than usual, I suppose." She nodded, her expression thoughtful, her gaze drifting to the window, to the gardens stretching out beyond. "I don't know. It just feels like there's something on your mind." Her words lingered in the air, filling the space between us with a quiet tension, a sense of inevitability that I couldn't shake. I wanted to reassure her, to tell her that everything was fine, that I was the same grandmother she had always known. But I knew that any attempt to dismiss her concerns would only make her more determined to find the truth, more certain that there was something I was hiding. "It's nothing, Chloe," I said finally, my voice soft, my heart heavy with the weight of the lie. "Just the summer season. You know how busy it can get." She looked at me for a moment, her gaze steady, a hint of doubt in her eyes. But then she smiled, brushing her hair back, a gesture that seemed to dismiss the tension, if only for a moment. "Okay, Grandma Eleanor, if you say so." But as she turned to leave, I felt a chill settle over me, a reminder that our secret was no longer safe, that the walls we had built were beginning to crumble, piece by piece. Later that week, I took a drive into town, my mind filled with thoughts of Liam, of Chloe, of the precarious balance we had maintained, the life I had risked for something I couldn't quite define. I stopped by the small cafe near the town square, hoping to clear my mind, to escape the weight of my choices, if only for a moment. As I sat by the window, nursing a cup of coffee, I noticed Martha, an old family friend, sitting across the room. She waved me over, her eyes bright with curiosity, her expression warm as she patted the seat beside her. "Lenore, it's been too long," she said, her voice filled with the kind of warmth that only comes from years of friendship. "How have you been?" I smiled, settling into the chair, feeling a mixture of relief and trepidation. Martha had always been perceptive, quick to pick up on things that others missed, and I found myself wondering if she too sensed the changes in me, the quiet secrets I carried. "Busy, as always," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "The summer season keeps us on our toes." She nodded, a knowing look in her eyes. "And I hear you've got a young man staying with you. Chloe's boyfriend, is it?" I felt a flicker of panic, my heart racing as I forced myself to nod, to keep my expression calm. "Yes, Liam," I said, my voice steady, though I could feel the weight of her gaze. "Chloe's boyfriend, a charming young man." Martha's expression softened, but there was something in her gaze, a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. "I've heard some things about him, rumors, mostly." Her words sent a chill through me, a quiet dread settling over me as I forced myself to ask, "Rumors?" She nodded, her expression serious. "Apparently, he's left a trail of broken hearts. Some debts, too, if what I've heard is true. Not that I believe everything I hear, of course, but I thought you should know." Her words lingered, filling the space between us with a sense of unease, a reminder that the life I had built with Liam was built on a foundation that could crumble at any moment. I thanked her, brushing off her concerns with a polite smile, but as I left the cafe, her words echoed in my mind, filling me with a quiet dread that I couldn't ignore. That evening, as I sat alone in the darkened house, I found myself questioning everything I had felt, everything I had believed about Liam. I wanted to believe that he was different, that our connection was real, but Martha's words cast a shadow over everything, a reminder that our world was both fragile and dangerous, a life that could be shattered with a single misstep. Back at Willow Creek, Arthur's behavior began to change as well. Though he had always been quiet, focused on his work, I noticed him watching me more often, his gaze lingering on me with a curiosity that felt both comforting and unsettling. He would ask me questions about my day, about the inn, his tone casual but filled with an underlying tension, as though he sensed that there was something I wasn't telling him. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, he looked at me, his expression thoughtful, his gaze steady. "You've seemed distant lately, Eleanor," he said, his voice soft, his tone filled with a quiet concern that made my heart ache. I looked away, feeling a mixture of guilt and sadness settle over me, a reminder of the trust I had betrayed, the life I had risked for something I could barely define. "Just busy, Arthur. The inn, the season, you know how it is." He nodded, his gaze never wavering. "I know, but it feels like there's more to it than that." His words lingered in the air, a quiet reminder of the life we had shared, the foundation we had built together. I wanted to tell him the truth, to confess everything, but I knew that our life could never be the same, that our world would shatter with the weight of my choices. And so I said nothing, letting the silence speak for me, letting the quiet between us fill the spaces that words could no longer reach. As the days passed, the tension between us grew unbearable, a quiet storm waiting to break, a life built on secrets that could no longer remain hidden. I felt the weight of my choices pressing down on me, filling the silence with a dread that refused to be ignored. And in the midst of it all, Liam remained a constant presence, a reminder of the life I had chosen, the trust I had betrayed. We would steal moments together, slipping away to the hidden corners of the inn, finding solace in each other's arms, even as we both felt the fragility of our world, the quiet dread that lingered like a shadow over everything we had built. But even as I clung to him, even as I let myself fall into the comfort of his touch, I knew that our time was running out, that the life we had created in the shadows could not remain hidden forever. And as I looked out over the lawns of Willow Creek, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a sense of inevitability settle over me, a reminder that our secrets would soon come to light, that our world was on the verge of collapse, a storm that would leave nothing but fragments in its wake. I had always thought that secrets, if buried deeply enough, would stay hidden. But as the tension built, woven into every word and every glance, I felt the inevitable reckoning drawing closer, a shadow hanging over us like a storm waiting to break. The discovery came on an evening that started like any other. Chloe had gone into the city for a late art opening, or so I thought. Arthur had retired early with a headache, leaving Liam and me alone in the quiet of Willow Creek. It was a simple touch, a fleeting moment, a hand on his arm as we talked, a look that lingered just a second too long. But it was enough. We didn't see her until it was too late. Chloe's footsteps on the gravel were quiet, but the moment I saw her standing there, her eyes wide with disbelief and pain, I felt my heart stop. A wave of dread crashing over me as our carefully constructed world shattered in an instant. "Grandma Eleanor?" Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with a raw hurt that cut deeper than any accusation. Liam's face paled, his hand slipping from mine, and for a moment we were all frozen, caught in the painful clarity of the truth. The look in her eyes was one I would never forget, a mixture of betrayal, disbelief, and a grief that was more intense than I could have imagined. Chloe's voice trembled as she spoke, each word like a knife cutting through the silence. "How could you? Both of you? How could you?" I opened my mouth to explain, but the words wouldn't come. How could I justify the choices I had made, the lines I had crossed? There was nothing I could say, no way to undo the hurt I had caused. "Chloe, Liam began, but his voice faltered under her gaze, his guilt as evident as mine. "I trusted you," she cried, her voice breaking. "Both of you. You were supposed to be my family." I wanted to reach out to her, to explain that I hadn't meant for any of this to happen, that it had been a mistake, a moment of weakness, but I knew that my words would mean nothing, that they would only deepen the wound I had inflicted. And so I stood in silence, watching the girl I had loved and raised break before me, the bond we had shared unraveling like the vines in a winter storm. Tears streamed down her face as she looked between us, shaking her head as though trying to make sense of the betrayal. Finally, she turned and walked away, leaving us standing there in the quiet devastation of what we had done. The fallout continued the next morning when Arthur found me alone in the kitchen, his expression distant, his gaze filled with a sadness that I had never seen before. He hadn't spoken to me since Chloe had confronted us, and I could feel the weight of his silence pressing down on me, filling the air with a tension that was both suffocating and inescapable. He stood there for a moment, watching me with an intensity that made my heart ache, and then, in a voice that was barely audible, he asked, "Why, Eleanor? After everything we built? Why?" The words cut through me, a reminder of the life we had shared, the years we had spent building Willow Creek, this family. I looked away, unable to meet his gaze, the weight of my choices settling over me like a shroud. "I don't know," I whispered, my voice thick with regret. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It just did." He nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to the window, to the inn that stretched out before us, a reminder of the life we had built and the trust I had destroyed. "We all make choices, Eleanor. I just never thought you would make this one." There was a pause, a silence that felt heavier than any words, and then he turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the quiet of the kitchen, the weight of my actions pressing down on me, filling the silence with a grief that I knew would never fully fade. In the days that followed, Willow Creek seemed to lose its warmth, its familiarity. The manicured lawns, once a source of pride and comfort, felt like hollow reminders of the life I had destroyed, the trust I had taken for granted. Arthur and I moved through the house in silence, each of us lost in our own world of regret and sorrow. The connection we had shared reduced to a memory that felt more distant with each passing day. Chloe left Willow Creek, taking Liam with her, though I knew that her relationship with him was over, shattered by the betrayal that had fractured our family. I wanted to reach out to her, to explain, to try to make amends, but I knew that my words would mean nothing, that the damage I had done could never be repaired. And so I remained at Willow Creek, moving through the familiar routines with a sense of detachment, as though I were a ghost in my own life, a shadow passing through the remnants of the world I had built. The silence became my companion, a constant reminder of the choices I had made, the life I had lost. I would walk through the gardens in the early morning, the cool air filled with the scent of damp earth and roses, the quiet of Willow Creek a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. The inn felt different now, as though it too bore the weight of my secrets, the shadows of the past lingering in the shadowed corners, a reminder of the life I had once known and the life I had left behind. The days drifted by slowly after they left, each one blurring into the next, the quiet of Willow Creek becoming a landscape of memories and regrets. Without Chloe's laughter echoing through the halls or Arthur's familiar presence beside me, the inn felt more like a monument to the life I had once known, a life that now seemed as distant as the city skyline on the horizon. In the weeks that followed, I withdrew into a world of solitude, my daily routines carried out with a sense of detachment, as though I were simply going through the motions. I polished antique furniture for empty rooms, walked the lawns as I had done 1,000 times before, each step a reminder of the choices that had brought me here, the life I had lost. Sometimes, in the early hours of the morning, I would sit on the porch, watching the sunrise paint the Hudson in hues of pink and gold, and I would let my mind drift back to that summer, to the moments of laughter and warmth that had filled these walls. I would remember Chloe's smile, the sound of her voice, the way she looked at me with a trust I had taken for granted, and I would feel the ache of that loss settle over me, a reminder of the price of my choices, the pain I had caused. I knew that I could never undo what had been done, that the life I had destroyed was gone, replaced by a solitude that felt both punishing and strangely peaceful. In some ways, I felt a sense of relief, a quiet acceptance of the consequences that had been inevitable from the start. I had made my choices, crossed lines that could never be uncrossed, and now I was left to face the world I had created, a world where the echoes of my actions lingered in every corner of this place. As the seasons changed, Willow Creek transformed with the passage of time, the vibrant greens of summer fading into the rich golds and reds of autumn, each leaf a reminder of the cycles of life, of the endings and beginnings that marked our journey. Willow Creek took on a quieter beauty, a reflection of the acceptance I had come to feel, the understanding that this place, with all its memories and regrets, would always be a part of me. I began to find comfort in the solitude, in the quiet that filled the spaces where laughter and voices had once echoed. I would walk the lawns in the cool of the morning, my footsteps the only sound in the stillness, a reminder of the simplicity of this life, the beauty that remained even in the absence of the people I had loved. In those quiet moments, I felt a sense of peace, a realization that my choices, painful as they had been, had led me to a place of honesty, a place where I could confront the person I had become and the life I had left behind. I knew that I could never return to the past, never reclaim the trust I had lost, but I could find a way to live with the scars, to carry them with a sense of acceptance, a reminder of the lessons I had learned. Months later, as Willow Creek lay dormant in the depths of winter, I stood on the porch, looking out over the bare lawns, their snow-dusted branches silhouetted against the pale sky. Willow Creek was quiet, stripped of its warmth and color, a landscape of shadows and stillness, a reflection of the life I had come to know. But in that quiet, I felt a sense of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was the promise of renewal, of growth that would come with the return of spring. I knew that Willow Creek would bloom again, that the cycles of life would continue, bringing with them new possibilities, new beginnings. And as I stood there watching the first light of dawn break over the hills, I felt a quiet sense of closure settle over me, a realization that I could find a way forward, that I could carry the memories and regrets of my past without letting them define me. Willow Creek would go on, as it always had, a place of beauty and solitude, a reminder of the choices we make and the lives we leave behind. With a final look at the snow-covered lawns, I turned and walked back into the house, ready to face whatever came next, carrying with me the lessons of that summer, the memories of the life I had known, and the quiet hope that one day I would find peace.